The world is in debt, but to whom? Governments owe trillions. Corporations borrow billions. Households are drowning in credit. And yet, someone is collecting interest. This isn't just accounting, it's architecture. A global system designed to keep money in motion and power in place. Where countries borrow in currencies they don't control. Where the lenders write the rules. And where every crisis becomes an opportunity for the creditors. Because behind every dollar owed, there's a dollar earned. This is not about numbers. It's about leverage. Who holds it? And who carries the cost? This is the story of world debt. Who profits? Who pays? And why it was never meant to be fair. It did not begin with global finance. It began with war. Kings and empires needed money to fight. But when taxes fell short, they turned to credit. The first state debts were seen as temporary, a necessary evil to fund battles or build infrastructure. But something changed. In the 18th and 19th centuries, governments discovered a powerful new tool. They could issue bonds. They could borrow from citizens and institutions, promising repayment with interest. Central banks emerged to stabilize this process, not just to print money, but to manage public debt, to create the illusion of safety. And the more wars they fought, the more they borrowed. Debt became permanent, not a response to crisis, but a feature of the system. It was no longer just a burden, it became a strategy, because debt had another quality. It could be sold, it could be traded, and whoever held the debt held influence. By the mid-20th century, the architecture of global debt had gone international. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement redrew the financial map. The US dollar became the world's reserve currency. Other nations pegged their currencies to the dollar. The dollar, in turn, was backed by gold. But when that link was severed in the 1970s, a new system emerged, the petrodollar. Oil was priced in dollars. Countries needed dollars to buy energy, and they borrowed to get them. This was not a natural evolution. It was a design, a blueprint for global dependency. Today, nearly every nation is in debt, not by accident, but by structure. Debt is no longer a tool for emergencies. It is the foundation of modern economics. And every bond issued, every loan signed, strengthens that foundation. A structure where growth depends on borrowing, where nations owe before they begin. It feels normal, but it was never meant to be. This system was built, and everything built can be redesigned, but only if we understand what was constructed and who it truly serves. The world runs on debt, but few understand how that system truly works. It begins with need. A government needs money for schools, for roads, for survival. But instead of printing it, they borrow. They issue bonds, pieces of paper that promise repayment with interest. And those bonds are bought by banks, hedge funds, pension funds, sometimes by other governments, sometimes by their own citizens, and sometimes by institutions far more powerful. Enter the International Monetary Fund, enter the World Bank. When nations are too poor to access private markets, these institutions step in, but not without conditions. Loans come with strings. You must privatize state industries. You must cut public spending. You must liberalize your economy, open your markets, and play by global rules. It is presented as reform. In reality, it is control. In many cases, these reforms benefit the lenders more than the borrowers. Foreign companies gain access to newly privatized sectors. Local industries are crushed by global competition. Social programs shrink, debt grows. And when a country cannot pay, it borrows again, to cover the old loan with a new one. The cycle repeats. This is not just economics, it is architecture. A design where every part serves a purpose, where debt is not a weakness, but a lever, a way to extract influence, to shape policy from afar. Even wealthy nations are caught in this machine. Their bonds are bought by central banks. Their interest rates are managed by monetary committees. But the logic is the same. Borrow, spend, grow, repeat. It looks like a free market, but it is a managed game, a web of agreements, ratings, conditions, and expectations. And those who pull the strings rarely appear on the stage. This is not chaos. It is choreography. Debt is not neutral. It is a tool. And behind every trillion-dollar loan lies a motive. Every system has winners. And debt is no different. The money borrowed by governments does not vanish into the air. It moves. It flows upward. Every payment made on national debt is income for someone else. Banks collect the interest. Bondholders receive the yield. Central banks accumulate assets that never lose value. It is the safest business in the world, because lending to a country rarely fails. Nations do not disappear. They just borrow again. So the game continues. Debt becomes an investment. The obligation of one state becomes the profit of another. But the profits do not stop there. Multinational corporations benefit from the reforms debt creates. When a nation accepts an IMF loan, it also accepts its conditions. Privatize, deregulate, open your markets. And who arrives first once those doors are open? Foreign investors, global brands, companies with capital and lawyers ready to carve up the remains. Ports are sold, energy grids are leased, water systems become private enterprises, essential services turn into revenue streams. And in the background, the vultures circle. Hedge funds known as vulture funds buy the defaulted debt of collapsing nations. They pay almost nothing for it. Then they sue in international courts to recover the full amount. With interest. Entire economies are treated like distressed assets, and when they fall, there is always someone ready to collect. Debt is more than money owed. It is power transferred. Each loan writes new terms of ownership. Each repayment shifts control. The wealth of nations does not vanish. It moves quietly into fewer hands, and so the structure remains stable at the top. Debt becomes a strategy, a way to keep wealth flowing in one direction. From the many who owe to the few who own, every debt must be paid, but not always by those who borrowed it. When governments owe too much, they do not declare bankruptcy. They tighten the belt of their citizens. Taxes rise, budgets shrink, hospitals close, teachers leave, and yet the interest keeps coming due. Inflation follows. Money loses its meaning. The cost of food, fuel, and rent climbs higher each year, and entire populations pay the invisible tax of devaluation. An entire generation is born already owing. Children who never borrowed a cent inherit deficits measured in trillions. They are told to work harder, save more, and trust the system that created their burden. In the developing world, the cost is even greater. Nations caught in debt traps must surrender control to survive. They sell what remains of their independence. Ports are leased to foreign powers. Farms are taken by multinational corporations. Mineral rights and energy reserves are traded to settle interest payments. Debt becomes the new form of colonization. No armies, no occupation, only contracts. Through these contracts, sovereignty dissolves. Decisions once made by citizens are now made in distant boardrooms. Democracy becomes a negotiation between creditors and debtors. The pattern is familiar. The rich world lends, the poor world repays, and the cycle repeats until ownership changes hands. But the burden does not stop at borders. Even wealthy nations live in quiet dependency. They mortgage their futures to sustain the present. They spend tomorrow's stability for today's convenience. Every policy, every promise is written against an unpaid balance. This is not just economics. It is morality in disguise. Because debt is not only a ledger of numbers, it is a record of trust, of who was allowed to take, and who was made to give. In the end, someone always pays the price, and most of the time, it is the ones who never had a choice. The system we live in was not born, it was built. Debt did not appear by accident. It was engineered, structured, reinforced by policy, politics, and profit, which means it can be reimagined. Throughout history, debt was seen not only as a burden, but as a boundary, a line that, when crossed, called for mercy. In ancient Mesopotamia, kings would declare debt jubilees, a clean slate, not out of kindness, but survival, because too much debt leads to collapse, to revolt, to ruin. After great wars, nations forgave debts to rebuild the world, not to lose money, but to regain balance. So the idea is not radical, it is ancient, and perhaps necessary once again. Today, new thinkers offer alternatives: debt relief for countries strangled by interest, monetary systems that prioritize human needs over yield, public banks without profit motives, universal access to capital without usury. These are not utopias. They are models, experiments, blueprints for something that does not yet exist, but could. The real question is not whether change is possible. It is whether we are willing to imagine it. Is an economy built on endless borrowing and infinite growth truly sustainable? Or are we just delaying the reckoning? Most people do not ask these questions. They live inside the machinery. They repay debts they never chose. They follow rules they never wrote. But awareness is power. Once you understand how the system functions, you can stop being its fuel. Not everyone will escape it, but everyone can begin to see it. And that seeing is the start of resistance. The future does not need to repeat the past. It can be rewritten if enough people demand a different ending. This time is not different, but what you choose to do with this knowledge, that is. If this gave you a new perspective, do not just scroll away. Hit subscribe. This is Economic Chronicles, where history exposes the present and the future is written in the lessons we refuse to learn.